Hello, everybody. Thank you to everybody who's joining us tonight. Thank you to you viewers. Thank you to First Fridays in the Exchange. And a reminder that even though we're all meeting online, the Exchange District is still there and it's doing its best in these difficult circumstances. So please check out our Facebook page to get a sense of what's going on with artists, with galleries, with independent businesses. Thank you also to Collective Broadcast Co., the other CBC, for helping out with tech support tonight. Like so many arts organizations, First Fridays in the Exchange has adapted to the pandemic, and we're just trying to bring people together to talk and relate any way we can. And another group that's doing everything they can to connect Winnipeggers to their city, to their place, to their winter, and to each other is the organizers of the annual Warming Huts competition. So we're very fortunate to have with us tonight Peter Hargraves, who's principal at Sputnik Architecture and one of the founders of the Warming Huts project. Peter holds a Bachelor's of Environmental Design from the University of Manitoba, a Master's in Architecture from the University of Oregon, and he's just really passionate about the ways architecture and design and public art can make our city better and can make us better. So thank you for joining us, Peter. And
thank you for having me.
And let's just go right into these beautiful images that we have that you've brought. So just tell us about how this all started.
Well, there's a long story and a short story. I'll just give you the short story. The short story is I was tying the skates of my three beautiful daughters when they were little girls. We lived just off of Fort Rouge Park on the Assiniboine River, and you know, my fingers were freezing by the time I got to my skates. I was miserable. And there weren't really any shelters. There were a couple of little shelters on the river. Anyway, a few months later, I was setting up an art show with my friend John Polipchuk in Calgary, and he mentioned this cool idea that these guys had about doing an art show, you know, capital A art show in ice fishing shacks. And so I thought about it, and that September, I called up a few friends in Winnipeg, Kevin Lowen from 701 Architecture and Sasha and Johanna from 546-8796 Architecture. And I think Travis Cook actually from 1x1 Architecture joined us also on the river, on the bridge. And I pitched this idea of having these shelters where you could tie your skates up and you know, that we could include art in them, either as an art show or art would be integrated in them. And I think it was Sasha said, well, we need to go talk to Paul Jordan. His office is right there. So I'd never met Paul before. And I think later that afternoon we had a meeting with Paul, and Paul said, absolutely, it's a great idea. And you know, 2 hours later, we got a phone call that said, not only did we have permission, we were really just asking for permission. We didn't ask for any money. He said, I think we've got 10 grand. And then like a day later, I think it was Manitoba Homecoming was a thing, and they offered 10 grand. And it was like, holy cow, this is crazy, you know? And really, it was just such a simple idea. We were just talking about creating cool shelters to tie up your skates on this thing that the river trail was there. It was kind of understood. Everyone understands that it's cold. And so that's how Warming Huts was born. And that first year, oh yeah, so the other thing that happened was Antoine Predock, who was designing the Human Rights Museum, got wind of this idea. I don't know, it was a week later. And said he wanted to participate, and it was like, oh, well, now we have this like world-renowned architect who's heard about this weird little idea, and you know, he's interested. And then we invited an architect from Manitoba who teaches at Dalhousie University, Richard Craker, and he immediately it's kind of in his wheelhouse, these kinds of installation projects, and so he jumped aboard. So we had 5 projects. within short order, and there was no competition, but we kind of built our projects, and they were well received. And because of Antoine Predok, we picked up international press,
Right.
and I think we well understood at that point that the idea was sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the shortest version that I have of that story.
Well, that is a very happy origin story, I've got to say.
Yeah.
And it's just expanded. Well, it's expanded and become, this huge thing, and with these international connections, but it's still really local, which I think is one of the great things about it. It's really responding to our winter and what it's like to live in Winnipeg in February. So
yeah.
And picture is beautiful too.
Yeah. This is a project by the U of M students. Every year we invite the U of M students to participate, and they always do an amazing job. We got a phone call from the city, I don't know, it was in June or sometime, and they were interested in, they had this project in mind. There's this idea of putting a bridge across between Fort Rouge Park and, oh goodness, I'm forgetting the name of the park on the other side on Assiniboine. Anyway, pedestrian bridge, and they wanted to kind of advertise it, and they wondered whether there was some way of doing a warming hut. And so we linked them up with the U of M students, and they created this project called Pontagon, which is brilliant. It's like this kind of shattered crystal structure that you can put together but take it apart, and it reflects and it shines light, and it sort of bridges. But when it's together, it's a star that forms a five-pointed star. And so, again, it just kind of highlights this ability of this project to collaborate. So here we have, city administration that's tasked with marketing an idea for a future project, and these students at the university who came up with this brilliant little structure that reflects light. On some days, it reflects light hundreds and hundreds of meters down the river. So it's a really beautiful project.
Yeah, and there's these long blue shadows, because there's winter light is very, very specific. It's not the same as summer light, so beautiful.
Yeah, and I think with the white of and what I love about this image is it's an aerial view, and it takes a while to figure out what it is you're looking at. Like and then you recognize, oh, there's people there, and again, these long shadows and the colors, and and it's again one of the moments that happens, especially near the end of the day on the Assiniboine. The light comes around some of the taller buildings and then shines down the river. So I don't know if you've had the chance to be on that river at, say, 5 o'clock some days, when the Open Borders project, you get this light shining through the big orange wall. Right. It's just gorgeous. So
I bet. Okay. Now this is one of the early projects, right?
Yeah.
By a local artist.
Yes, this is Ava Tarzia working with 546-8796, called Sunspot, and I'm delighted because of COVID. We felt that we couldn't invite an international guest artist this year. And so we brought back the band. We invited these guys, 546-8796, 701 Architecture, and Scatliff Miller Murray to all produce projects. And this is called Sunspot, and they did another Sunspot, which is this delightful playground, which you can enjoy out on the river this year or on South Point. But this was this project was kind of the first really clever interpretation of this idea of warming huts, where it wasn't actually a warm space. It was something that warmed your soul. And it, on one hand, we kind of would say it tongue-in-cheek, and on the other hand, it's not so tongue-in-cheek. It actually does lift your spirits in the cold of winter. So there's value to that.
Yeah, and the color. I mean, just in the sort of black and white and gray landscape, and suddenly, Beautiful.
Yeah, it's why I love this photo, because it's kind of got the gray tones that we're so used to, and then there's this beautiful orb hanging there.
Yeah. Okay. And now that is very happy. That's also very happy.
Yeah, this is Nuzzles. And I included this slide because it was one of the huts that had the most delightful but short life of all the huts that we've produced. And it was by a Toronto firm that won the project. So there's two stories here. But the first is that the team from Toronto showed up, and they literally came from the hotel and were walking across the plaza, and these things were set up, and they're gorgeous and they're photogenic.
Yeah.
And a group of school kids got off the bus, like right behind them, and kind of charged past them when they saw the Nuzzles. Everyone knew what it was, and a gigantic pool noodle war erupted, and it was they gave these poor huts a haircut, and there were pool noodles everywhere, and we had struggled so hard to find a way to attach them so that they wouldn't rip off. And the principal of the firm, I was kind of expecting him to be devastated. He was like, "That's awesome!" Like, there was nothing destructive about what the kids were doing. They were just playing. They were given this huge toy, and they were just playing with it. And so it was, it was a delightful project. The photos it was so photogenic. This is one of the projects that I get calls about almost every year. We've had calls from a company in Florida at one point that wanted these things in front of their mall for a mall opening. I was like, well, good luck with that. But no, they
watch out for those.
Yeah, exactly. Just don't let any school kids anywhere near it. But yeah, just and the other story was that that team went back to Toronto, and they were so inspired by the Warming Huts project that they started their own version of Warming Huts called Winter Stations, which has been a really delightful intervention on the beaches of Lake Ontario in Toronto. And again, it's just it's authentic for them, just like the Warming Huts is authentic for us.
Right.
So I was really delighted when they did that, because there was no greater testament to the fact that you have to find out and be yourself in your place and celebrate the things that you can celebrate, which they've done, and I think which we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great story. I just, when you do have works that are sort of kind of interactive, you don't know where that's going to go, right?
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, what do we have next? Oh, wow. That's punchy.
It is punchy. This is called Red Blanket. And we didn't put it up this year. The blankets got shorter and shorter every year. They got played on a lot.
I was thinking, because I've seen visuals where it seems a lot taller.
Yeah. So there's some funny stories behind that too, which we won't get into. But anyway, this project. So every year, the jury that we have, which are kind of the original members of the Warming Huts, they have the task of working through sometimes 200 submissions and deciding on only 3. And of all the years that we've done this, so we've now had over 1,500 submissions in all the years that we've done this. So we have this huge collection of ideas. The Red Blanket, from early in the morning, rose to the top, and there was no question. Every jury member that saw it was like, that's a winner. And it was a simple, so if anyone out there is listening and they want to submit a competition entry, if you can make your idea simple and you can sketch it in just a few diagrams and get your point across, that's all this was. It was just a really simple line drawing. And it was obvious what it was. It was obvious how it worked. You could wrap yourself in it and stay warm. You could swing on it and expend energy and get warm that way. And it was red. And it was just the materials were simple. Anyway, it's the winningest of all the huts, and I wanted to just pay it its homage.
Okay, great. And what do we have next? Oh, wow.
So this is my self-pity slide. It might be me, but it might be one of
good.
Well, yeah, it was taken on Lake Muir at Fort White, and it was who knows what time of night, and it was minus 26 or something. It was very, very cold. We were kind of soaking wet. We were very tired, feeling very sorry for ourselves, harvesting ice. And it's one of those, they happen from time to time, but when you're doing a project like this, you do have moments where you ask yourself, like, I'm an architect, what am I doing freezing out here? Why am I doing this? This is not what I trained to do, so on and so forth. But a few days later from that moment, I was at the Forks. I was listening to Royal Canoe playing a concert. I was mesmerized. It was sublime. Bucky Drieger tried to describe what he was feeling at that moment to the audience, and he actually got choked up. And it was like, well, this is why we do it. This is where art, which sometimes requires very hard work and perseverance and all of these things that artists will tell you they have to have in order to succeed. It's why you do that. And because you have those moments where they're just inexplicably beautiful. And for a lot of us that night at the Royal Canoe concert, it was just kind of elevated to this level of heaven that, you just can't beat it. So well worth the suffering.
That's great. Okay, and okay.
So I put two self-pity slides in a row. I don't know if Luca Ron Caroni has logged into the show, but he's in Norway right now, and he has been one of our great collaborators. He's become a great friend. He's won the competition twice, 2 separate occasions with different projects, lovely projects. But he taught us all about ice and how to harvest ice and how to appreciate it and how to work with it. And he and I and another artist here in Winnipeg named Chris Pankow were building the Anish Kapoor project a couple of years ago called Stackhouse. We had cold weather when we harvested the ice. We harvested just under 200 tons of ice. We were in the process of processing it into flat slabs, so that we could build this big 5-meter cube out of ice. Which was a stunning project. And on January, 25th, when it's supposed to be really cold in Winnipeg, we had pouring rain for 2 days, and all of the ice that we had harvested was lost. And it was, we went home there was nothing we could do. We went home that day, and, our shoulders were slumped, and, but this is credit to the Forks. They didn't give up. They're like, we've got to produce this thing. So we called all the machines back. We got back out on the river. We cleared another site. We harvested another 200 tons of ice. We processed it all and built the project. And I think that year, Luca, Chris, and I were still working on the project. Luca had to fly home. Still working on the project at 4 a.m, and I was like, Luca, you've got to go home and pack because you're gonna miss your flight. So we Chris and I finished it the next day, but we scurried home, and he packed quickly, and then he was back to Norway. But it was again just the delight of perseverance, because it ended up being an amazing project, and again, you just can't give up. But it was warm, and it was shockingly warm, and it was, again, we take the cold for granted, and we delight in the cold. Not everyone delights in the cold, but yeah, it was kind of scary. It was like, this isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, and do you think that maybe is part because you're doing this winter event, outside winter event that needs, ice and cold, and you do it at the same time every year, and you start to notice that there's these variations. I mean, I used to just take when I was a kid, Januaries were always cold, and that's not just old people talking about when they were kids. They were actually colder, and so I mean you're celebrating winter, but there is also this sense that it kind of is a marker maybe for climate change as well, right?
I think that's a very true statement, and I think it's really, really important that we pay attention to these things. On the one level, we're just talking about a weather bomb that took away our fun and impacted something we were tasked with.
Right.
But on another level, it's not a myth. Like this, we are getting warmer weather. Our polar ice cap is receding. Polar bears are not surviving like they should. The land, the ecosystems are changing. And so we can take stock of the situation now and say, well, that was a bummer that we had to reharvest ice. It's not just about that. There's a way bigger, way more important discussion to have, and this illustrates that. And if it can be illustrative and it can be helpful, then it should be, because we can't kid around. Like in years to come, it's not going to be about losing our playtime. It's going to be serious things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's see what's next. Oh, and I should mention to viewers, if you have questions, you can just put them in the chat function, and we can see them. Yeah, so what are we looking at here?
So this is the project we did with Guy Madden. We collaborated with him. He was the invited artist. It was the first year. Oh, we had worked with Tanya Tagak a year previous to that. It was the first year we kind of went sort of into film, and of course, Guy is a genius, and he was awesome to work with. He's very creative, and every kind of idea and exploration was like, yeah, we should do that. And then he comes back, and it's like, wow, this is cool. And so the project was called A Temple of Lost Things, and it really kind of celebrated this the ephemeral nature of our winter, of ice, of the moments we have on the river. Because again, in summertime, the river's water, and it's hard, you can't cross it unless you have a boat, and it's all these things that are different about it. And in wintertime, we have this landscape that all of us can engage in. It's a park. It's a walkway. It's a transportation. It's a way to work. All of these things that it isn't really in summer. But in June, it's hard to imagine. It's like, yeah, I was standing under the Norwood Bridge, and I was at a Camerata Nova concert in a project by Guy Madden, and it's like, were you? That's impossible. It's like, yeah. So it just celebrated this ephemeral quality of both the warming huts and the river, but also of life and the way we experience things and the way we engage art. You cannot have when you go to live theater, or you are an audience member of a live music performance, it only happens that way once. And so you have to cherish it, and it's special that way. And that's not true of all arts, where you can kind of go back to it and visit it, or you can watch a movie again. So I think it kind of makes it precious in its own way.
Yeah, and that's the whole project really is like that, because they're there, and then someone has just asked, I guess we forgot the numbers. How long has this been running? So what was the year that you...
2009 was the first year we put huts out. So we're 12 years, I guess. Yeah.
Right. And what's next?
This is another review of Guy's project, and it really does. It for me, it kind of captured the ghost-like feeling that project had. We also integrated ice into it in a way that we hadn't yet explored. The Stackhouse, the Anish Kapoor project hadn't happened yet. So there were a few things that, I might be having those backwards. But anyway, we used driftwood. We used this kind of ghost-like screen, and then we used these ice blocks to kind of create that environment. And when I saw this image, I was like, yeah, it really did have that kind of, in a way, spooky, but in a way like hauntingly beautiful. Because you could look at it another time, and the wind wouldn't be blowing it, like it shimmered, moved in the wind. It didn't. If there was no wind, then it didn't do that anymore, and it was a completely different place.
Yeah. So many of the pieces are kind of interact with the weather. I think the light, the shadow, if it's windy or snowy, or yeah. And the ice has that kind of that gorgeous quality to it. And we were talking before, and you mentioned that, like, if you saw Winnipeg's rivers in the summer and imagined them frozen, you might like the river near my house. I would think like blocks of brown blocks, basically. It's pretty muddy, but the ice is gorgeous.
Well, it's funny. We have cut ice out of the river, taken it out, and it's sitting next to us. And we've had people ask where we got the ice from. And it's like, we got it from right there. And they're like, there's no way on God's green earth that the Red River produced this beautiful, clear blue ice. Yeah. And it's just the way that ice forms. It's H2O molecules fusing with H2O molecules, and the dust rolls by, and it just doesn't fuse into the ice. So it really is very clean ice. Yeah, it's lovely.
Okay, what's next? Oh, okay.
So the project with Guy was kind of this exploration of other versions of art, and this project was the year we did the first concert with a fellow named Terje Isungset. He's from Norway. He's a jazz musician, and he specializes in playing on instruments that are made out of ice. And so at this point, working with Luca, we did have this kind of expertise. We knew we could harvest lots and lots of ice, and we knew we could work with it and make these instruments for Terje. And the pavilion was also a collaboration with U of M students, working with Lancelot Kaur and Jason Hare. And so we had this incredible venue in the harbor. And the other collaborator was the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. It was the opening of the Winnipeg New Music Festival. So the timing was just perfect. So again, the suspension of reality for these moments. It was -29 that night. There were 500 audience members. These were all subscribers to the WSO. So it wasn't as though we had dragged people kicking and screaming, severe weather alpinists to a music concert. It was like, no, these are WSO subscribers. And they were sitting there in their beautiful fur muffs and jackets, and they looked gorgeous. And they sat there for an hour and a half through this concert. It was stunning. At one point, there was a mist, like a cloud above them, which was just from their breath. It was just suspended above them. And then when the concert was over, it was the first time I'd ever heard this muffed applause. It was this, heavy beat of big mittens coming together. And it was delightful. It was again, for me, it was one of those moments where it's like, wow, we did this. Like we did this thing where, nobody would have believed that it would be possible, but it is. It's we can do this, and we can, But we just have to think carefully, and we have to have some expertise, and we have to imagine. That's all, and it'll happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and a good reminder that there's so many great people in the Winnipeg community to collaborate with, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's the arts community in Winnipeg is, again, it's often said that there's this great arts community in Winnipeg, and it's like, it's true. It really is. If you've lived in other cities, you know kind of what it's like when there's not really a great art scene, and it doesn't matter which version whether it's music or visual arts or architecture. There's this powerful kind of pressure in a way, like we've got to be good, because I went to a music college, but like as an architect, it's like you've got to be good because the other artists around you are good at what they do. So
and there's these really interesting crossovers too, among Okay, and this is another view of Guy's work, I think, is it?
Yeah, so this is actually a still. He projected a series of nights where he projected some of his shorter films onto the Temple of Lost Things. And again, it was gorgeous because the wind would come along, and then the shape of his film would literally change and morph, and it was this whole other piece, a whole other element, dynamic, and it made me think again. It's like, okay, yeah, so there's this whole other possibility of how we make art. Could we have a warming hut that's like laser beams that shine up, one from Carmen, one from Thompson, one, who knows? Like we don't need to be confined necessarily to the things we think of as space or time or and it was just, I don't know, again, one of those delightful moments that happen. It's like, oh, the possibilities are endless. So I'm hoping somebody comes forward and is like, we want to do this warming hut that's whatever, a laser light show that you can see from Mars.
It could happen. It could.
Yeah, it could happen.
Okay, and what's next? Oh, yeah. So tell us about this piece. And what a beautiful photograph. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite huts. And I say that in the context of having done several huts myself. So this is actually in our first year of the competition. They were a couple from Tel Aviv, Israel, and it's called Woodpile, and it is this beautiful poetic diagram of how our winter works. It is fire in the middle around which you sit and stay warm, and the walls around you are made out of wood, stacked wood. Mm-hmm. And as the winter wears on, you take wood from the walls, and so as spring arrives, the walls have disappeared and the sunshine enters in, and you don't need a fire anymore. Right. So it's just this very poetic, graceful idea. Mm-hmm. In a steel cage, mm-hmm. in a way, in a kind of an industrial, harshly built thing, but just gorgeous. And having winners come from outside of Winnipeg, mm-hmm. For me, has taught me that Winnipeg, and when they arrived, it was the first time I realized that Winnipeg actually is exotic. And even when we say it, people laugh because it's like, yeah, that's kind of funny, cute, but it's actually true. Because when you see somebody from Tel Aviv delighting mm-hmm. in the fact that they're surviving in this minus 25, and it's hard to breathe. You've got to, we had to teach them to dress properly. Like I took them to Mark's Work Warehouse. From the airport, we went to Mark's Work Warehouse. We kitted them with jackets and boots and things, and we taught them how to dress, and they delighted in it. And often the statement that week was, people at home aren't going to believe what I have to tell them. And, I've been in places that are considered exotic, and I think, oh, people aren't going to believe the flowers I'm looking at or the birds or whatever it might be. And for us, it's the cold. And now that we know that we can have delicious food served to us out on the river, or we can take in gorgeous concerts, music concerts, and we can see beautiful things out on the river. We just have to dress properly, and we have to move. It's really important to move. So it is exotic, and it can be marketed, and it can be enjoyed. For me, again, I needed somebody from outside of Winnipeg to explain that to me. They're from a place that's 25 degrees Celsius every day.
Yeah.
And yet they could show that to us. And the other part of that project was that it just demonstrates how art and design can transcend. Sometimes people will say, well, only a local person could design a proper warming hut. It's like, no, actually, a smart person from another place who's thinking artistically and has been trained in this field, actually, they can design the best warming hut. So it really does show how art and design and architecture and landscape architecture, all those arts, can transcend borders.
Yes, absolutely.
It can transcend all of the barriers that we have, economics and politics and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And seeing our winter through other people's eyes, I think helps us. Yeah,
it's kind of delightful, actually.
Yeah. Okay, what's next? Oh, and this was a huge favorite, right?
Yes.
A Winnipeg favorite.
It's a Winnipeg favorite. It's a Winnipeg Winnipeggers who designed it. This was the first time a Winnipeg group. There's three individuals from here in Winnipeg that designed it, and I can't prove it. Although I think if I had to, I would. I think it's probably the most photographed piece of architecture in Canada. Certainly that year, there could have been no other architecture project in Canada that had that many photos taken of it. I mean, there were lineups on the weekend. There would be lineups of people just waiting to take a photograph, and in order not to get somebody else in it, you kind of had to. People started lining up, so it's like, it's my turn. Everyone clear out. I want my kids sitting there. People showed up dressed up, in period costumes. People showed up with crokinole boards to play crokinole, and it did, like, it was a local firm that clearly. So if I compare it to the Tel Aviv project team, this was a local firm that knew our touchstones. Like, there's something about that rustic cottage. There's something about those quirky objects on the walls. There's something about, and they muted them. They're all colored the same way.
Right.
But
that crazy neon, like traditional, but then neon shade. Yeah.
Right. So it was it just resonated with people. You know, it's like, well, my grandpa's cabin is like this, or our cabin's like this, or small, it was cozy. Even in the outdoors.
Yeah. No, that's a great piece. Okay. And okay.
So over the years, we've had a series of rogue huts. Those are huts that aren't winners of the Warming Huts competition per se. Some of them have just been smart Alex that have showed up and done their own huts, which have been delightful, and we've celebrated those. In this case, this team, also from Winnipeg, Stantec, and a musician from Brandon named Leanne Zacharias, and Garth Lee, who's a luthier here in Winnipeg, collaborated to create these wonderful wind-powered music instruments on the ice. And again, they didn't win. I think they might have been in the top 10 that year. But then when we realized they were a local firm, we approached them and said, we love your project. It was close to being a winner. We can't declare it a winner, but we'd still like to build it. And of course, they they obliged us, and yeah, it was a delightful installation that kind of harnessed all of the parts of our winter that we love.
Okay, so it makes music?
Yeah, so each of them kind of had a feature in it that so some of them were like kind of like flutes. When the wind blew through them, they kind of made this haunting noise, like the howl of a house, you know. And some of them spun, and they had chimes in them and clickers in them. So yeah, they were all really well. And I'm going to throw in this little anecdote.
Oh, yeah.
I was skating down the river or skiing down the river, and I got, close to Assiniboine Park, and I met Garth Lee, the guy that made these instruments. And there he was with another piece of PVC, except this time he had created a pump out of a piece of PVC pipe, and he could stick it in the ice and pump 150 gallons of water a minute. He would fill up a garbage can, and then they flooded the skating rink out in front of their house on the river with said garbage can. So this guy he's great. He's just, again, it just goes to show all the genius in Winnipeg. It's been very delightful this year to see all the neighborhoods come together and all the communities and neighbors just
kind of spontaneous projects that are.
Yeah.
It's great. And I think this year we needed it more than ever, so it's, I think people are getting creative.
Absolutely. I think even last year, sort of near the end of the year, it started dawning on us that, if things haven't changed, which they haven't really, that the river trail would be a vital piece of our fabric this year. Like, it was just absolutely essential. Yeah. And so again, for me to see all of the communities and all of the neighbors coming together and just like building these incredible skating trails and ice rinks and sculptures, you name it, just beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what's next? Okay, so this is this year, and this is a serious issue of people experiencing homelessness, right?
Yes. So this is the U of M project for this year's warming hut, and in early autumn, it became evident that there might not be a U of M submission this year because of COVID, because the university was taking very seriously how students could interact.
Right.
And so it seemed like it was going to be, in a way, impossible to do anything. And Eduardo Aquino and I had some chats, and we discussed the possibility of engaging the students in a way where they might not need to make a project, but it was really important to keep the students engaged. Again, I was thinking back to when I was an architecture student and how much I loved studio and being together and, doing suffering and doing all this fun stuff together.
Pulling all-nighters.
Exactly, all-nighters. It seemed very sad that there wouldn't be the possibility of students engaging the Warming Huts project, because it's always been a delight to see what they do. Anyway, so many Zoom meetings later, and this group of students that volunteered, I wasn't part of a studio, that was all sort of done outside of their normal class hours. The conversations came, they went in many directions, but they always came back to, we're doing these warming huts, and now that we have a chance to consider actually what matters, we've got this really fun project on the river, but there are, our neighbors, our relatives, our people, our citizens, some of them are suffering a lot. And it was fascinating to watch as their minds kind of came to grips with the fact that in design, you are not going to solve all of the big problems. You're going to create solutions that will maybe together lead to broader, bigger solutions. But in this project, you aren't going to have the ability to solve homelessness. So what are you going to do? Is it just to say then I can't solve the problem? And so no, that wasn't a possibility either. So really, it came down to this idea that we must do what we can to make life a little bit better for individuals that are experiencing homelessness. And they did that. And we were very fortunate to have Main Street Project come alongside and show us what they knew, and to have Thunderbird House come alongside us and teach us what they knew. And then a few advocates from the community who were also, so knowledgeable in different ways on this matter. And so, so we created these sitting pods along the facade of the Main Street Project Mitchell Fabric Building, because people gather there as they wait for services. And normally it's just standing around. And if you get tired of standing, you have to sit on the concrete. And so these are slightly warmer places to sit. They have little shields that come out that are meant to interrupt the flow of wind. And then in the other project, I think that got installed today, was a sharing circle on the property at the Thunderbird House. Okay. And that included lots of discussions with the fire department about how we could put a fireplace, not an open fire pit, but an enclosed wood stove essentially into that space. So that's forthcoming. We will be fabricating that and putting that into that space to again just take small step, but just take the edge off of some of these cold days for those people.
And of course, I mean, a lot of the places where people experiencing homelessness go, the library, Tim Horton, those aren't possibilities right now. So it's very important this year. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's been a conversation about kicking people out of bus shelters. And again, it kind of drives me crazy when we consider the idea that we must kick people out of bus shelters. Well, I hate to ask a dumb question, but where do you think they're going to go if their last resort was sleeping in a bus shelter? Where are they going to go from there? And so we have to step way back and say, why is somebody in a bus shelter? Not what are we going to do with them after they. It's like, yes, we can't kick them out of the bus shelter when it's minus 25 if that's their only option. But why are they there? And we have to go back to that and deal with that. That's not appropriate for a first world country with all the resources that we have. It's intolerable.
Yes.
So again, just going back to the warming huts. It's indicative and demonstrative of how this project doesn't have borders. It doesn't have a specific mandate. It's got this opportunity really to explore all of these ideas. And I was really proud of that group of students who let their thinking go there. Because there were times when it was intimidating. It's like, this is hard, and it's like, yes, it is hard, but still super important. It's like, in my own pathetic way, cutting ice is hard, but it's worth it. And this is way more important. This is another stratosphere of importance. And so we can't ever let go now that we've engaged that matter. So I was thrilled. I was thrilled and proud. I think it's one of the best projects that's come out of the whole thing.
Absolutely. Okay. Oh, okay. And maybe we'll finish off with this beautiful image. And this is a bit pandemic related too, in a way, because it's St. Boniface Hospital. So tell us.
So this is called Divergence, and it really is a simple, as again, like the red blankets, like really simple drawing that everyone understood. And it speaks on a couple of levels. One, we had somebody submit an idea that was a skating trail. Essentially, it's just a skating trail. And it's like, we already have a skating trail, but it's like you've reinterpreted.
World.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so we've got this person who very cleverly reinterpreted it for us, added color to it, squiggled it a bit, and it's just completely delightful. It's delightful when you're on the ice and navigating it, because you can't actually quite see it when you approach it. You can't see the whole thing. We're looking at it from 1,000 feet kind of thing, and it's like, wow. And you really don't get that sense there, but you do get to enjoy, skating in these big loops, and they really are big loops. A little bit of a funny story I'll get back to afterwards on that, but when we design things, we don't always, well, very often, we don't take into consideration all the possibilities of what we're doing. Sometimes we don't take into consideration the negative implications of what we're doing, and other times we don't take into consideration the potentially delightful situations. And in this case, one of the feedbacks that I've received is from staff at the St. Boniface Hospital, who are just delighted that they have this big, beautiful thing to look at out their windows. So not only staff, but patients. Yeah. And so, you've got a hospital full of people who are tired, and it's been a long year, and they've got this gigantic piece of art that it was like a love letter that was scratched on the ice for them. Yeah, I don't know what it says, but you can kind of make up your own. You can make up your own text. But yeah, again, it's with art. You can it defies definition in a way on many levels. And this is one of those levels where it's like, of course, it should have been there all along, kind of thing.
Yeah, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
Well, and it kind of, in a way, it sort of sums up the whole project from its inception, is that you have this idea, it would be nice to have somewhere to sit while I'm putting my kids' skates on, but you don't know where it's going to end up, because it can,
Well, anyone that's heard me talk about the warming huts has heard the description that I've tried. The illustration that I tried to use is that when we started the warming huts, it was a little bit like we were on a hill and we saw this huge big beach ball sitting on top of the hill, and all we had to do was just touch it to get it to roll down the hill. It didn't take a lot of energy. Like, it wasn't as though we had to convince governments and bureaucracies and all of these insurance agents and all that stuff that this was a cool idea. It was just like, do it. And then ever since then, this big ball has been bouncing down the hill in this, most delightful way. And our only job has really been to stay out of its way and let it do its thing, because too much interference would have also changed it in a way that might have affected the fun.
That's a great metaphor. I love that. Well, I guess, are there any questions? I don't see any coming up. So thank you so much. Thanks for sharing all terrific stories, and and
thanks for what you guys are doing with thank you for what you guys are doing with reminding people of what art is and why it's important, and thanks for having me on the show. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to First Fridays in the Exchange, and we'll see you again next month. Okay, thank you.
Take care.